Well, we're still waiting for Donald Trump to begin speaking tonight in Des Moines, Iowa, part of his thank you tour. But as he tours the country, Democrats are still trying to figure out exactly what happened last month. How did we get here? The most obvious explanation, of course, is that agents of the Vladimir Putin regime stole the election. Even ranking Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee believe that, including the ranking Democrat. His name is Congressman Adam Schiff, and we talked to him last night. Let me just ask you one final question. Can you look right into the camera and say, I know for a fact the government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of John Podesta's email?
Absolutely. The government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of our institution and the dumping of information.
Of John Podesta's email?
Not only in the United States, but also in Europe.
Okay, you're not, you know what, you're dodging.
And Tucker,
no, look and say, I know they did. John Podesta's email, they hacked those.
And I think that Ronald Reagan will be rolling over his grave at your carrying water for the Kremlin.
I'm not carrying water for the Kremlin. You're a sitting member of Congress on the Intel Committee, and you can't say they hacked. You're gonna have to move your show to RT Russian television, because you know what?
This
That's
is perfect.
Just so
this is
beneath your office, because it's so dumb and you're being duplicitous. I'm asking you, did they hack Podesta's emails? And you can't say it.
Insults like that, Tucker. You
just said I was carrying. Oh, you said I was carrying water for Putin. That's pretty hilarious.
You know, when you essentially are an apologist for the Kremlin, that's what you're doing.
I'm going to one last time, Congressman. Look into the camera and say they hacked John Podesta's emails. We know for a fact that Putin's government did that. You can't, and you know you can't, and you're hiding
Tucker,
behind weasel words.
I just said that the Russians. I'm not going to be specific as to
Oh, because you don't know it. That's why. All right. Done. One. Joining us now to break this all down, Democratic strategist Julie Roginsky. Julie, it's great to see you.
It is so good to see you.
Here's the assessment from the Director of National Intelligence. This is from August 7th about these various hacks, not just to Podesta's email, but including it. He said this: the hacks are, quote, consistent with the methods and motives of Russian-directed efforts. I believe that. That's very different from saying we know for a fact that Putin's government hacked John Podesta's emails. And my only point to the congressman was, when you sit on the House Intelligence Committee, you ought to be precise about what you know and what you don't know. And Democrats are trying to explain the election results by saying the government of Putin did this. My only point is they don't know that, and they shouldn't claim they do.
Well, there's two things here, right? One is you allege that Democrats are making the excuse that Donald Trump won because Vladimir Putin hacked into emails. I'm a Democrat. I don't think that's why he won.
Okay.
Separately from that, though, it seems to me from both sides of the aisle, including the Republican chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Senator Lindsey Graham, all of them believe, including Democrats and Republicans in a bipartisan manner, that the Russian government, with the direction potentially of Vladimir Putin, but some level of the Russian government, happened to hack into our emails. And so the fact that they did interfere in our election, which is why both sides of the aisle are urging both this administration and the incoming administration to do something to punish them. And that's very separate from whether they actually affected the outcome of this election. I don't think Donald Trump won because John Podesta's email was hacked. I do believe, based on what our own government has said, and both sides of the aisle have said, who are privy to the intelligence, that in fact the Russians did have something to do with hacking into these emails, into the DNC and also into John Podesta.
This is why this is such a disingenuous effort on the part of Democrats, and it actually kind of steams me. I will tell you.
Okay.
Because we have seen a series of hacks over the past 10 years into all kinds of government institutions, including the State Department and the Pentagon and the personal email of the CIA director, the White House. There's almost no institution in Washington that hasn't been hacked, probably in some cases by the Russians, also the Chinese. And yet you haven't seen any kind of response like this. We've sat passively by as, for example, a lot of our key trade secrets have been stolen by the Chinese military, and people just kind of accept it as a status quo. And now, when there's a suggestion that it helped Hillary lose, people freak out when they said basically nothing before.
All right, well, Tucker, I can't speak for the entire Democratic Party because I'm not the party spokesperson, but I will speak for myself as a Democrat and as a liberal. And I will say this: when Mitt Romney back in 2012 said that the Russians were the largest geopolitical threat to this country, I said amen, and I said I agree. And I think Vladimir Putin and the government that he runs is a geopolitical threat, not just to us, but with every enemy that we have, whether it's Syria or Iran, or I could go on with what he's doing interfering with Europe, is a geopolitical threat to us. Mitt Romney was 100% right. And so if the Chinese are hacking or if the Russians are hacking, we need to retaliate. We cannot sit idly by. If this is what spurs this to finally do this, that's great. I wish we would have done it earlier. I don't think the Russians were.
Pardon me,
go ahead.
Okay. As someone who sat and watched the Iraq War foment and then begin on the basis of bad intelligence. Pardon me for my skepticism when I ask precisely of the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, do you have proof? Do you know this? Before we, quote, retaliate, can you prove it? And he calls me an agent of Vladimir Putin for asking the question.
Tucker, I've
kind of seen this movie before.
I watched that entire segment. He did look into the camera, and he said he knew that Vladimir Putin did it. If you're asking him to release...
I beg your pardon. Look at the tape. He did not say that. He said hacked into our American institutions. And I asked him on the air and off, do you have evidence that he hacked in to John Podesta's emails, which were that was the pivotal question in this election? No. So don't allege it, don't imply it, because there are big stakes here.
But, Tucker, with all due respect, you have to admit that if evidence all points to it and you don't have a smoking gun, you can deduce from certain intelligence. It's not like the Russians are innocent. We're not accusing the Swiss of hacking into us. It's not like, oh, my God, God forfend, Vladimir Putin would never do something like this.
But I'm not
defending Putin's
moral standing.
You're asking him to give you
You're saying we should, quote, retaliate. And I'm just saying, having seen this again and again and again, other agendas at work pushing us toward, quote, retaliation, maybe we have a right or an obligation to say, well, what exactly do you know? Well, oh, be quiet. You're an agent of Putin.
No, listen.
Whoa,
I don't think you're... I love you, and I know you, and I've had some great conversations.
But I'm not saying you're saying that, but Schiff said that.
Okay, well, I'm not going to defend what he said. I don't think you're an agent of Russian television, but I will say this. At the end of the day...
I don't even watch RT.
I've never watched RT. I've heard they're interesting. Let's put it that way. But I will say this. Vladimir Putin is not a good agent here. And if you're saying that you don't think because there's no smoking gun that they hacked into us, then what you're basically saying is that you will not trust any intelligence whatsoever with respect to anything. That means you have no trust. That means you have no trust in our institutions, Tucker. And if that's the case,
doesn't mean that at all. It means that,
I
don't know, when you can predict the fall of the Soviet Union accurately,
yes.
When you can tell me whether or not Iraq has weapons of mass destruction in large quantities,
okay.
That builds trust. And when you fail, I have questions. That's all I'm saying.
That's fine.
And to mindlessly accept what the intelligence community says, no thanks.
You have people like Mike McCall, who's the Republican chair of the Homeland Security Committee. You have people like Lindsey Graham, who's a Republican senator, who's by no means in the tank for the Democratic Party. If all of them agree that there's a great likelihood, a very probable likelihood, that the Russians hacked in, and you're saying, I need a smoking gun, you're never going to have Vladimir Putin go on TV like Osama bin Laden used to with a newspaper saying, today I hacked into the DNC,
We're unfortunately out of time,
John Podesta.
As the father of a 19-year-old son, it's going to take a little more than that, and I think that's my pace.
I don't think we should go to war with Russia, but I think we have ways to retaliate without your son or mine going to war. I'll just say that.
Amen. Julie, thanks for joining us.
Thanks,
I appreciate it.
Tucker.